Hey everyone, this is Randall, and welcome back to the Imperial Minis channel. Today we're doing something a little different for the channel. We'll be taking a look at the new House Bolton faction. Specifically, we'll take a high-level look at the base tactics deck and a granular look at the commander tactics cards. I won't cover the base tactics deck in detail because that's been done very well already by Brian over at Big Top Gaming. I'll provide a link to that video in the description. I'd like to do a few videos in the lead up to the House Bolton release. I might do a quick army showcase video showing my Bolton units that I've been painting in the lead up to the release. And then I might also put together a video of some early Bolton army lists that I find interesting and maybe talk about some synergies and kind of fun stuff that the faction can do. And then once the faction is released, you'll see some battle reports on the channel featuring the Boltons. What some experienced Song players might notice when they look at the Bolton base tactics deck is that this deck looks awfully familiar. Faction-based tactics decks typically recycle some cards from other decks. Aside from outliers like Greyjoy and Night's Watch who have wholly unique tactics decks, most other factions decks have between 4 and 5 unique cards out of their 7 cards. The House Bolton tactics deck is the least unique of any previous faction with respect to cards we haven't seen before. That said, it kind of can get away with this, and we'll talk about that. So let's quickly go card by card and see where these cards came from. Okay, starting with Sadistic Games. This card originally came from the neutral Ramsay commander, and Cruel Methods also came from neutral Ramsay, as did Our Blades Are Sharp, which is the House motto card. Moving down to Remorseless Examples. This is the only card from the deck that doesn't either come from a previous Bolton deck or is a new card. This one came from 2 places. It comes from Daenerys, Queen of Marine, and the Weepers tactics deck. A Flayed Man Has No Secrets comes from ROOSE, from neutral ROOSE. And Fear Keeps a Man Alive comes also from neutral ROOSE. Harsh Punishments is the only unique card in this tactics deck, so it's the only newly developed card in this tactics deck. Now, a moment ago I said that the Boltons can kind of get away with recycling these cards, and I think a big part of that is that these neutral commanders, Roose and Ramsay, the developers don't want those commanders in neutral armies to have some sort of advantage over their Bolton faction-specific counterparts. So, and then at the same time, they don't want Ramsay and Roose within the Bolton faction to just be a complete copy-paste from their neutral version. So they had to kind of come up with some way to both make the House Bolton-specific Ramsay and Roose unique and also make the neutral Ramsay and Roose feel unique without denying the House Bolton faction some of those powerful cards that are in the neutral Roose and Ramsay deck. So of the neutral Roose and Ramsay cards, which there would be 6, 3 for each commander, in the House Bolton base tactics deck, 5 out of those 6 are represented. And as we'll see a little later on, the 6th card has made its way back to the Bolton version of Roose's tactics card. I think this is going to be an indicator of what's to come for other mini factions if House Bolton is successful enough in retail that it justifies future mini factions. I think the one people are expecting most is probably Tyrell, and those of you who are familiar with Baratheon will know that Loras' commander has a Growing Strong tactics card, and Growing Strong is the house motto of House Tyrell. So we could see something very similar here where some of Loras' cards would get pulled into the House Tyrell base tactics deck. So since it is the house motto, you would expect Growing Strong to be pulled up into the Tyrell deck, and then for Loras, the Tyrell version of Loras, presumably to have some new cards of his own. So as I said in the intro, we're not going to go into details on these cards since it's been done well elsewhere. We're going to focus this video primarily on the Commander's Tactics cards. We'll discuss where those cards came from, which ones are unique, which ones are recycled, and then discuss the uses of those cards and kind of the flavor of the 3 Bolton Commanders. So starting off with STEELSHANKS Walton. This guy is, he has 3 tactics cards: Price of Fear, Rush of Aggression, and Taunt. And his commander attachment card comes with Iron Resolve, which we're all pretty familiar with. It's a powerful defensive ability. And Shared Fear, which is a new ability specific to STEELSHANKS Walton so far, which reads, each time this unit fails a panic test, all enemies within short range of this unit become panicked. So this kind of goes in line with some of the Bolton mechanics of harming themselves or panicking themselves. And you might look at this set of abilities and think they're kind of anti-synergistic, or that it doesn't make sense. One ability, Iron Resolve, helps you not fail panic tests, and then Shared Fear helps you when you fail a panic test. So Shared Fear will panic your enemies when you fail a panic test, but Iron Resolve makes you not want to fail panic tests. But if you think about it, though, I think what STEELSHANKS Walton wants to do is be in a unit that has a good chance of failing a panic test. And then Iron Resolve is mostly there to take fewer wounds from failing that panic test. So Iron Resolve kind of guarantees that for a normal panic test, if he fails it, he's only ever going to take a maximum of 2 wounds and might not take any wounds. But failing that panic test, he can spam out panic tokens around him. So you could see STEELSHANKS going into maybe a Cutthroat unit with a 7-up morale value, or Dreadfort Spears, who also have a 7-up. Iron Resolve would bring them to a 6, which is around a average morale, with modifiers that could knock him back down a little bit. But if he's in a unit with poor morale, he can be more reliably dishing out panic tokens to everything around him. So now we'll look at where his tactics cards came from. Price of Fear is his own unique card. So this is unique to STEELSHANKS. Rush of Aggression, we've seen before in a couple of commanders. It's from Victarion, from Greyjoy, and Andrew Estermont from Baratheon. And then Taunt, we've seen before on Rickard Karstark from the Stark faction. Now looking at Price of Fear, it reads, when an enemy unit fails a panic test, target one friendly combat unit in long range of that enemy. They may perform 1 maneuver action. So this is a pretty powerful card, I think. In a list where you're wanting to do a lot of moving. So this will synergize very well with, let's say, Flayed Men, who might be positioning to get a rear charge or a flank charge. This could synergize well with Bolton Bastard Girls, so that they can move around a flank. And Boltons are going to be focusing on making units fail panic tests. So this can be used pretty reliably to get one of your high damage dealing units into a really good position. Okay, next we're going to look at Rush of Aggression. And this card is a card I've always had a lot of fun with when I've played it in other factions, because there's nothing that feels worse than having a 2-inch. You need to roll a 2 on a charge roll, and you whiff it. So this just guarantees you can just send it across the table if you need to, and gives you crit blow, automatic 6, and if it's anybody other than STEELSHANKS unit, you become vulnerable. But most of the kind of damage dealing Bolton units aren't going to have real great armor anyway. Cutthroats are on a 5. Bastard Girls are on a 6. The only other real high damage dealing melee unit, the Flayed Men, are on a 3. I've heard some folks saying that STEELSHANKS wants to be in Bolton Bastard Girls because of this card, or partially because of this card, because the Bolton Bastard Girls don't want to become vulnerable because they're already rolling a 6. But I don't really subscribe to that, because I think the Bolton Bastard Girls have anti-synergy with STEELSHANKS Commander card, his attachment card. So the Bastard Girls are already on a 5-up morale. Iron Resolve brings them to a 4-up, and that's going to make it difficult for your Shared Fear ability to proc. So I think you're kind of, if you're putting him in the Bastard Girls, you're trading off, you're kind of trading the ability to use his Shared Fear unit attachment ability for not taking a vulnerable token when you use Rush of Aggression. And to me, that's not really a worthwhile trade. I think to get the most out of this card and his commander attachment, you're going to want to put him into Cutthroats. Cutthroats don't have the best morale, so you can rely on them to probably fail some panic tests to share that fear. And then they can make use of Rush of Aggression by just sprinting across the battlefield, getting crit blow. They already have Vicious. If they're attacking something that hasn't activated yet, you're going to make that other unit vulnerable. And then if STEELSHANKS is in your unit, you're not becoming vulnerable yourself. So I think him and Cutthroats with this ability, or with this tactics card and his commander ability, makes for a pretty good combo. Alright, so Taunt is a pretty interesting card for the Bolton faction because they have a couple of units that your opponent doesn't really want to charge into. So this could be used to make your opponent charge into your Dreadfort Spearman and take a set for charge attack. It can make your opponent charge into some Blackguard and take a Horrific Visage panic check. And if that opponent opts not to attack or charge, then they take a couple of tokens, which you can't really be sad about. But this is also kind of another movement shenanigans card, just like his Price of Fear card, because you can dictate to some degree where enemies are engaging themselves. This card and the ability now, it gives the opponent an option. It's not just up to chance. They have the option, but if the opponent does go for that charge, it's allowing you to kind of dictate some of the motion on the battlefield, which is always a good thing. It's always what you want to do. Next, we're going to take a look at ROOSE Bolton, and this is his new Bolton-specific version, his non-neutral version. His commander attachment is still the same, and for me personally, I wish that the Bolton version of ROOSE Bolton and Ramsay, especially Ramsay, got a little bit of an update to make them feel a little bit more special. Now, personally, I really like ROOSE Bolton's commander attachment. I think it's a good combo of intimidating presence and spread fear. They're both things that help Bolton do what they want to do. But I wish that they had just maybe boosted them a little bit to kind of cover up for a lot of the list building restrictions that Boltons have, just to make ROOSE and Ramsay feel a little bit more special. Now, ROOSE's cards here are Whispered Threats, Seeing Their Flaws, and Dreadfort Secrets. And those who are familiar with his neutral version will realize that Whispered Threats is the third of his 3 tactics cards from his neutral version. 2 of them are in the Bolton base deck, so this is the third one. And let's look at where these other cards came from. So, Seeing Their Flaws, this one comes from Kevin Lannister and Alistair Thorne from the Night's Watch, and Dreadfort Secrets is a brand new card specifically for the Bolton version of ROOSE. So taking a look at Whispered Threats, it reads, when an enemy NCU activates, if that NCU claims a zone this turn, after resolving that zone's effect, target one enemy combat unit. They become vulnerable. Then target one enemy combat unit. They become panicked. So everybody who's used this card before on the neutral version knows how great it is for just throwing tokens out there. You're giving your opponent a choice between taking a board position and taking 2 tokens, or passing with that NCU. And most of the time, unless it's a inconsequential activation or inconsequential turn, they will just eat the tokens and allow you to put tokens on their unit. One possible problem here that we'll see kind of faction wide is that there's a lot of mechanics that generate panic tokens. I mean, ROOSE has a couple of them himself, and there's just a lot of ways for Bolton players to put panic tokens on their opponent. So I do worry about a little overlap when it comes to token generation for panic tokens in particular. That you're going to have to be expending those tokens like crazy because you're just going to, I think you're going to lose some value if you're using all these different token generating effects that are overlapping on the panic tokens. Seeing their flaws reads, after an enemy combat unit completes an action, that enemy becomes vulnerable and panicked. Attach this card to that enemy until the end of the round. While attached and ROOSE Bolton's unit is attacking that enemy loses all abilities and cannot be targeted by friendly tactics cards. So I think this card is pretty cool. It's kind of got a little of the same flavor that ROOSE Bolton's neutral tactics card, A Flayed Man Has No Secrets, also has, where that allows you to cancel the effect of a order or a tactics card. And with this one here, it allows you to shut off all abilities of that unit when you're attacking them for the rest of the round, which can be pretty powerful, especially when you consider what some of the abilities are out there that really cause you some headaches when you're playing into them. So you can think of a unit with the resilience order, so you can, when you're attacking that unit, you can just shut that order off, or say a shield wall, hardened, anything that's non-innate, this thing will just turn off when you're attacking them. And this card is the only of ROOSE's cards that has any synergy with the unit attachment version of STEELSHANKS Walton, who comes with Vassal, so he acts as ROOSE's vassal. And the Seeing Their Flaws card is the only way that Vassal has any synergy for STEELSHANKS. But I see some pretty cool things you can do with that. So you let's say you're up in the front line with ROOSE, and you're going to want to put him in something like a Blackguard. And let's say he smacks an enemy unit, and you attach Seeing Their Flaws to that unit. So now anytime that ROOSE hits that unit this round, they lose their abilities. And now if you have STEELSHANKS, let's say in a unit of Dreadfort Archers, he can shoot into that unit and also cancel all their abilities. So, that's depending on what that unit's abilities are, that can be pretty powerful if you have two units that can shut off all that unit's abilities for the whole round. And then they can't be targeted by tactics cards, so a unit that has some kind of defensive tactics cards or some kind of retribution type tactics card that does target them at least, they couldn't take advantage of those abilities. And his third card, Dreadfort Secrets, this is the new card. So this is his one newly designed card. It reads, after a friendly unit completes a melee attack, if it destroyed an enemy rank, attach this card to one friendly infantry unit in short range of the attacker. All enemies they are engaged with become panicked. While attached, each time an enemy unit activates in short range, that enemy becomes panicked. So this is one of those cards that, while it's really great at generating panic tokens, I feel like you're going to have too much overlap with other effects. So I think this one looks really good, and it might be good. I've never played it, but it just seems like this is going to be one of those ones where it'll be topping off units that don't already have a panic token, but there's probably going to be other effects out there already that will have already given panic tokens to a lot of these units. There's also a reminder for me that I wish the House Bolton faction had some kind of a faction-specific kind of a rules card or something to interact with panic tokens. Like, every time a enemy unit receives a panic token and they already have a panic token, they instead suffer 1 wound, or they instead suffer 1 panic test or 1 normal panic test, just something like that, because there's so many mechanics in this faction that throw out panic tokens that I think you're going to lose value on some of these cards and effects that are just piling panic tokens on top of panic tokens and just doing absolutely nothing. That I kind of wish that the Bolton faction had some sort of special rule to interact with multiple panic tokens. So the flavor for ROOSE's commander, I think it's pretty clear that it's token generation and kind of ability manipulation. So his commander attachment card wants to inflict panic wounds and trigger panic tests. His tactics cards want to pile condition tokens onto the enemies. And then Seeing Their Flaws is a kind of a control kind of a combat control card to control enemies. So he's less of the kind of movement shenanigans of STEELSHANKS, and he's definitely different than RAMSAY, as we'll see in just a few minutes, or in just a moment. But he is unique in that he can dish out a lot of condition tokens, and I think Seeing Their Flaws is going to be a fun one to play around with him, and also to see if it's worthwhile bringing the STEELSHANKS attachment along to make the most out of Seeing Their Flaws. All right, and the third of the Bolton commanders is Ramsay Snow, and just like ROOSE, his Bolton commander attachment card is identical to his neutral commander card, which I really have always hated his attachment card. Horrific Visage is, I mean, it's fine, but I wish there was just one more ability on there. It always just feels bad when a commander attachment has one ability. This also has counter synergy with the Bolton Blackguard, so him having this ability, putting him in the Blackguard does nothing, which kind of feels bad. So now in the Bolton faction, that gives you the option basically of putting him in the Bolton Bastard Girls, the Cutthroats, or the Dreadfort Spearmen, and those aren't bad options, honestly. So it's just kind of sad when his commander attachment card straight up kind of conflicts with one of your few number of infantry units, which kind of makes it ineligible to be a home for him. So looking at his tactics cards, he is unique in that he has 2 unique tactics cards, and that's Skin Collection and Spoils in Flesh. Opportunist is shared with Theon Greyjoy from the Greyjoy faction, which I think is kind of funny since Ramsay kind of takes Reek around with him everywhere he goes, and one of his 3 cards is shared by Theon Greyjoy, which is kind of funny. Now, taking a closer look at his tactics cards, we'll start off with Skin Collection. It reads, start of any turn, attach this card to one friendly infantry unit until the end of the game. Each time this unit destroys an enemy rank, place 1 order token on this card. Enemies engaged with this unit suffer -1 to panic tests for each order token on this card, up to -2. One thing to note about this card is that it only affects infantry units, which another card in the tactics deck also has an ability that only affects infantry units. That's Cruel Methods, where it can provide heals, but it only provides heals to an infantry unit. So you'll know, I'm sure, that the Bolton Flayed Men are a very powerful unit. And I think if I'm trying to kind of read the developers' minds a little bit here, I'm thinking they didn't want the Flayed Men to be able to take advantage of every single melee ability in this game, or every single mechanic in the faction, I mean. So I'm sure they had a concern that Flayed Men are already extremely popular throughout the game, or have been historically. And they probably had a concern that creating this new faction, they wanted to make sure that people didn't just run 2 units of Flayed Men in every list, or automatically just put Flayed Men in every list. So I think they wanted to put some incentive in there, or negative incentive for players to explore outside of the flayed men bubble a little bit and not just automatically take flayed men all the time, because there's going to be some cards or some abilities that aren't going to really interact with them. That said, it is an interesting ability. It's kind of one of those quest cards where you're going to have to put orders on it for it to do something. Knocking a rank off, though, isn't that difficult of a task. And once the unit that has this is charged up, they're going to kind of have a passive vicious ability. So, let's look at the cutthroats. Let's say the cutthroats get skin collection on them, and they get 2 orders on them, and they attack an enemy unit. They deal wounds, and then just from vicious and skin collection, that enemy unit's going to be at a -4 panic test, which is pretty cool. It's also cool imagining cutthroats wearing somebody else's skin. That'd be pretty scary to me. Second card we'll look at is Opportunist. It reads, when a friendly unit is performing an attack before rolling attack dice, if the defender has not activated this round, this attack may reroll any attack dice and gains precision or vicious. If the attacker is Ramsay Snow's unit, gain both instead. So a couple of comments about this one. This is the card that Ramsay inherited from Theon. And right off the bat, you'll kind of notice that it has the condition if the defender has not activated this round. And if you're familiar with the Boltons, you'll know that the cutthroats also have this same condition on their ability. So with the cutthroats, when they attack something that hasn't activated this round, they make that unit vulnerable. So you could see playing Opportunist on a cutthroat at the start of the round, or on an enemy unit that hasn't activated yet, and potentially giving that unit a vulnerable token, and then re-rolling your attack dice, and then gaining precision on top of that. The cutthroats already have vicious, so I won't mention that, but having cutthroats swinging into something with re-rolls, precision, and a vulnerable token is going to allow them to cause some pretty serious damage. You could also see playing this on Bolton Bastard Girls, although they also already have vicious, so there's some lost value there. But if they're already in a melee, let's say you're doing a last first situation where you charge them in at the end of last round and top of this round you swing with them, you could drop this down. Reroll your attack dice as if you were charging and get precision. That would not be terrible. But with this card giving a unit vicious, there's really only the Dreadfort Spearmen who don't natively have vicious. The Flayed Men have vicious, Cutthroats have vicious, Bolton Bastard Girls have vicious, and you can use this on a ranged unit though. So the Dreadfort Archers could use this and potentially use this just to give themselves vicious if they're firing into a melee. Because if they're firing into a melee, they're already going to get rerolls and precision. So they could play this just to give themselves vicious. Or they could play this on an unengaged enemy, get rerolls, and if it's a squishy enemy, take the vicious. If it's a heavily armored enemy, try your luck and take the precision. So I think it's a pretty good card all around for use in the faction, even with the overlap of the vicious keyword. And the last card we're going to talk about is Spoils in Flesh. It reads, after a friendly unit completes a melee attack, if this attack destroyed an enemy rank, one friendly unit in short range of the attacker restores 1 wound, plus 1 wound for each of the defender's destroyed ranks. So this reads a lot like the Fueled by Slaughter ability, except it doesn't just have to target the enemy that actually, or the friendly unit that did the damage. So you could attack with a full health unit, take a rank off of an enemy unit or kill an enemy unit, and then end up doing kind of like a short-range rally cry, essentially. Let's say you killed an enemy unit, you're gonna have the chance to heal something for 4 wounds, and it is in short range, not long range, so it has to be something kind of nearby. But this is a pretty good healing card. Boltons do have several healing cards, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, having cards to heal is never a bad thing. It's not going to be a card that necessarily is going to, swing the game for you, but it is a good card to kind of help sustain your army a bit. So talking about Ramsay's flavor, his is a little bit of a mixed bag. So he doesn't have kind of one thing he wants to do. You'll see his horrific visage is, that's a negative panic modifiers when something attacks him. Skin collection also has the stacking panic modifier. Opportunist is an attacking card, so that's a kind of a damage dealing card, and Spoils and Flesh is a heal card. So Ramsay has a little bit of everything in his tactics set of tactics cards. So everything that Boltons want to do, which is to kill things, panic things, and heal off of dealing damage. So Ramsay kind of does a little bit of everything. If it wasn't for the fact that his Commander tactics card was a little bland, I'd recommend him maybe, but there's also kind of a big opportunity cost of taking Ramsay Snow as your commander, because that means you can't take him as an attachment. You can't take the 2-point attachment with Reek, and then you also can't take the 4-point NCU version of himself that gives Fueled by Slaughter as an influence. So for me, he's, I think, probably the weaker commander choice of the 3 of them. A big part of that is just how useful I think his attachment and NCU are. But he'll still see some play, I think. But I think ROOSE and STEELSHANKS are going to be the more competitive picks. So here I want to just take a really quick high-level view at which tactics cards of the tactics cards for the entire faction so far are new. We see in the base deck there we have harsh punishments. That's the new card. That's a new card. SteelShanks has Price of Fear. ROOSE has Dreadfort Secrets, and Ramsay has Skin Collection and Spoils and Flesh. Which you look at them there, and that's only 5 cards, which is 31% of all the Bolton Tactics cards, which may not seem like a lot, but I think you really have to look at all the tactics cards together and kind of see what the sum of all their parts is, not really focus so much on whether they're all new or not. I like to, justifying it to myself, I guess, I like to think, if you look at like a type of cuisine, you look at Mexican food, Italian food, Indian food, those cuisines all use a kind of a set of ingredients. They have very identifiable set of ingredients that they use, and they use those same ingredients in a lot of different dishes, but all those different dishes, even though they have the same ingredients in them, all come out differently, taste differently, and are all good in their own ways. So the way I like to think of it is, you have all these tactics cards that have been reused before from other places, but they have been rearranged into kind of a new dish here in the Bolton faction, and being arranged differently, I think it will make those tactics cards feel different and feel new. I think what they have is a fun mix, and whether it's competitive or not, that has yet to be seen. But I think it will definitely be at least a very fun faction to play for a while. So that's going to do it for this video. As I said at the beginning of the video, I do have plans to do a couple of more kind of Bolton themed videos. Probably the next one will be a unit showcase where I just show the units that I've painted so far for Boltons. And then I'd like to do a video where I do a little bit of theory crafting and army building and show some lists that that have looked fun to me, that kind of lean on some of the different synergies maybe that I've talked about in this video. So I'm pretty excited about the Bolton faction. I don't think they're going to be setting the competitive scene on fire, but I do think they're going to be a very popular faction to play. They're going to hopefully bring in some new players into the game, and I think this idea of a mini faction is going to be something that CMON is going to be paying close attention to see if it ends up being a financial success, because I think they have probably more territory they can explore with mini factions than they do have left to explore with full-fledged factions. So I think if this faction does well, that we can probably look to see some additional mini factions coming down the line. And whether mini factions are good for the game long term or not is going to still be up for debate amongst the community. I think whatever brings people into playing the game is a good thing for the game. You could argue that the developer spending resources on a mini faction takes away from the time and resources that they have to dedicate to spending on updates on the main factions. Takes away their time from developing new units for the other factions. But we don't know whether that's true or not. We don't know what their resource constraints look like exactly. For me, though, I am not a high-level competitive player, so when fun stuff comes out, I like to try it. I mean, like if you've watched my channel for any period of time, you know I don't always play the most meta stuff. I like just kind of playing what's fun. You know, you've seen a lot of elephants on my channel. That's testament to, you know, where my competitive priorities are. But yeah, I'm looking forward to them. I think they look like fun. And if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and just be on the lookout for a couple more Bolton videos that will hopefully be coming out in the coming few weeks. With that, this is Randall signing off.